In prevention, we are all leaders. Whether you're leading a nationwide prevention initiative, facilitating statewide prevention community, you're a coalition coordinator, or a one-person shop, you are a prevention leader. How we show up and how we engage with others to create positive change takes all types of leadership. So sit back and enjoy these conversations with your fellow prevention leaders from across the globe who are sharing their lessons learned, best practices, and strategies for success. Welcome to the Prevention Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Clausen. So honored to have you all with us today. I'm curious, have you all ever been to Texas? No? No worries. Today we're headed down to Texas and stopping in at the University of Texas at Austin. Now, for decades, substance use in college campuses have been talked about as an inevitable rite of passage for college students, and creating a norm that can far outshadow the dynamic pursuits of college students that really revolve around academics and future opportunities. So today, we're going to have a different conversation around college life, substance use, and one that focuses on holistic health rather than one of misuse. You see, the team there is enlisting the entire community to make a difference, creating a culture of healthy community, connections, and coping skills, and also reducing substance misuse and its harms. Y'all, we're chatting with Kate Lower, the director of SHIFT. Now, Kate and her SHIFT team is a team of prevention leaders that are engaging the community in a dialogue that really changes the culture of campus substance use from one of misuse to one of well-being. So without further ado, Kate, hey, been looking forward to this conversation. Welcome.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here and talk shift, as we say.
Yes, talk shift, and I will do my best to enunciate throughout this podcast.
Likewise.
So let's just start things off. Would you mind sharing with our listeners just a little bit of your background and how you ended up at UT Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say I took the circuitous route. I actually have a clinical background. So I am a board certified and trained and licensed clinical professional counselor and a dance movement therapist. So I really started out in the clinical realm as a therapist, creative arts therapist, in a variety of audiences. So I've worked with folks from, kids and adolescents, all the way up to seniors with Alzheimer's and dementia and pretty much everything in between. So inpatient, outpatient, I've worked in addiction recovery centers, really just kind of ran the gamut, ultimately was in private practice. And a mentor of mine was actually in higher education and prevention work and kind of tapped me at one point and said, hey, I've got an opening on my team and I think, you might really enjoy the work. And I was like, yeah, not interested. I got a job, but the key kind of really enticing idea to me was prevention and working as a therapist in the clinical realm was so much about trauma and trauma response, which I love and I still love that work. But the idea of prevention and thinking globally and strategically about how to really prevent some of the trauma that I'd been dealing with was really just wouldn't let me go, right? Like it just kind of was like, you should really pursue this. And so I always laugh with her that, it wasn't really until I was interviewing for the job that I was like, I really want to do this. This really feels like a good flex of my brain skills, And so ultimately I ended up doing both for a long time. And I was a substance misuse prevention specialist at an institution in the Midwest in Chicago, and loved it. I mean, I really loved working with students. I really loved flexing the prevention part of my brain. Really was appreciative of our approach, which was very holistic, right? It was really, while I was kind of the specialist in this area, we were trained in sexual and relationship violence prevention. We, talked a lot about holistic student health, and that was really a really good fit for me. I really enjoyed working with students in that way. And partners and faculty and staff and the like. So in that position, I think I did some really great work that I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of the office and how much we were able to grow. But I would sit in my office and be like, I'm so frustrated. If I only had resources or institutionalization, or, if only I could do, something bigger, what I would do, and then this whisper of shift kind of came across my plate somehow. And it was just that. It was here's this grant funded initiative that puts resources and some institutionalization and creativity all on a plate that said, come talk about the culture and these bigger global, issues on this campus. And I call it my put up or shut up moment, because it was then that it was like, okay, well, I could sit in my office and wish that I had these things, or I could really kind of like see what we can do when we think about culture. And how weird and nebulous is that? But I got to do it. It was kind of that challenge that called me, and so I picked up and moved all the way down to Texas, and have been here for the past almost 3 years already. And it's been an interesting 3 years, to say the least.
We'll get into what has made these last 3 years interesting. Don't you worry, folks. But listeners, y'all have heard us saying shift. Let's just clear things up right now. What is SHIFT?
Yeah. SHIFT is a grant-funded initiative at UT Austin, and it's really with the goal of shifting campus culture as it relates to substance use. And really, we're hoping that this is a shift that happens nationwide, but really starting at UT Austin. So our goals are really twofold. One, we really want to reduce those negative consequences we see related to substance misuse. And part of that is really helping folks understand the continuum of both use and consequences. So understanding that, I think historically, I should say, we talk about substance use and misuse prevention very polarized, right? It's either abstinence or recovery. It's either, you're, flourishing, or, substance use is really, overtaking your life. And while those are part of the conversation, I think we're hoping to open it up a little bit to help folks understand when we talk about negative consequences, absolutely recovery, substance use disorders, overdose, physical and sexual assault are part of that. But it could also be a student showing up late to class or not performing as well on an exam because they were, not getting the sleep that they needed, or, including hangovers and all of the like. And so when we talk about that with students, you see some light bulbs start to go off of like, oh yeah, even though substance use isn't the main thing that I'm maybe focusing on right now, like it's definitely getting in the way in these ways. And then, the same continuum with use, that there is moderate use, there is safer use, there is high risk use, and really helping folks, students as well as faculty, staff, and community members to understand this broader kind of context. So that's one goal, right? Reducing those negative consequences related to substance misuse specifically. Mm-hmm. The other goal is to increase overall student well-being. And so we do this by really taking that strengths-based approach in all of the work that we do. And we really, ascribe to the Search Institute's 40 developmental assets that we've kind of honed in and kind of articulated for our community. But it's really that idea of how do we layer on these protective factors to really help students thrive, to help students be well and succeed and be empowered to make their own decisions when it comes to their health and well-being, but also just their trajectory for their future. And so that's been a really key component of that overall well-being. And I think as prevention leaders, we all, I think can agree that if we layer on these protective factors, we're going to see a reduction in those negative consequences related to substance misuse, as well as mental health issues and struggles related to that. So that's really, SHIFT is really kind of set to change the culture in those two ways. And so we do that we have 6 pilot initiatives that we've kind of launched and gotten into the world that we're really able to kind of leverage what exists and then further innovate where we see opportunity to do so.
What does the SHIFT acronym stand for?
Good question. SHIFT is not an acronym. I know for
Oh,
higher education, it's really
right?
rogue. We're changing culture already.
Dang. You just blew my mind. I need to just process for a minute.
I know. We like to say we're not an
Okay.
acronym. We are a bold call to action.
Ooh,
Hmm.
all right. Awesome. I like it. I like it. I want to ask you about culture change and prevention. When you put those two words in the same sentence, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, that's another great question. And I can say those have been some of the most interesting conversations we've had over the past 3 years. I think we, in general, right, like we talk about culture change, um, and kind of acknowledge as if we all have this working vernacular of what that means. But I think it's something that really takes some time and effort to articulate what is culture change. And I think what we've talked about in our team, we've spent a lot of time in activities and experientials and looking through data and things like this, is how are we going to capture that? What when we say culture, what do we mean? And then what do measurements look like for that? And so part of that is, certainly the data, incident data, reporting. And I think it's also seeing, we talk about the image that we see, right? And seeing parties, right? Like, how does a party look different if the culture is different? And it's like, yeah, there's more harm reduction resources available, right? There's more water, there's more food, there's students maybe like implementing more strategies. And so what does that visual look like? And maybe there's not only these parties that we've been used to seeing, but maybe there's other events or other opportunities that students are engaging in, connecting around, that we hear student stories start to sound a little bit different. When I first got to campus, one of the kind of what's the word, like sleuthing things that I did, but not very intentionally, but I would go around campus and just kind of sit in public spaces and coffee shops or on the quad or on the mall and by the tower at UT. And I would just kind of sit and observe, and I would often overhear students conversation, and just naturally it would go toward like, oh my gosh, did you hear what so and so did last night? They were so drunk. Or they like, oh, this party, I don't know if I want to go out this weekend. Like, just naturally, all of these conversations kind of gravitated toward substance use. And so when I think of culture change, I imagine sitting in the mall and overhearing these conversations. And maybe it still, diverts to substance use, but the tone is different, that it's not the same kind of heaviness or concern or that weight of like, oh, do I or don't I? Where it feels like everyone feels like they see themselves in the community, no matter what their choices are around substance use, and they know their resources. I think that's a big part of it.
Absolutely. And when I was with the Mid America PETTC, we kind of took that approach. We wanted to change the culture of the prevention workforce in our 4-state region. And the motto for that was build the community to build the capacity. And we wanted to build a regional community of prevention. And what we were looking for was the folks from one state reaching out to the folks from the other state, sharing notes, sharing resources, sharing ideas. And a little brag moment here. The beauty of the community in that region now is 2 states came together to plan a virtual SAPS training, because they each had resources and support and strengths to bring to the table. They both needed SAPs for their workforce. And so they came together and collaborated on it. Like, I just loved it. It made my heart so happy to see states crossing their state line.
Yeah, I love that, Dave. And I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of community. I think that's something that is really a core value of Shift, and a core mission of ours is to create community and engage community members in prevention, right? I think we're talking about student culture, but we also acknowledge that students are coming into an environment and a culture that we've reinforced, right? We being staff, faculty, parents, alumni, even community members. So while Shift is really talking about student culture, we're engaging the entire community, as you said in your intro, right? Like, that is a key component. And I think we've really seen, I don't know if I want to say a full on breakdown of community, but I think our community has shifted, right? I think with the pandemic and even before that, right? Like, how to enhance that sense of belonging, how to enhance that sense of connection. Connection and community are so key to shaping and reshaping and reinforcing positive culture norms that we want to see. So I really appreciate that idea of, community and crossing community and having, I think my another kind of like, what does culture change look like to me is that everyone around connected to campus, anyone who sees themselves as a Longhorn in whatever way, shape, or form, sees themselves as a preventionist, that they see their role in supporting student well-being in whatever big or small way. I think that is going to be where we really see some traction take off.
I'm trying really hard not to go off on a rant or soapbox. But yes, we are all prevention leaders, whether state level, federal level, a regional community coalition on a campus, in a family, a bit like we all play a part in prevention and creating those safe, healthy communities. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll just add, part of our, evaluation of Shift, because we're really invested in, seeing and knowing what works. And our evaluation plan has hopefully reflected that. But through these conversations we've had about what is culture, we've created this, what we call our thread question that we are asking in pretty much every survey that we do, to what extent do you believe these sectors play a role in prevention? And so we're asking students, we're asking faculty, we're asking everybody, like, who do you think plays a role? And I think that's where we're starting, just to get a sense of, how folks see them, how faculty see themselves as preventionists or as playing a role in kind of shaping this culture. And we're hoping from that information, we'll really be able to hone in on some meaningful conversations in those realms.
I can't wait to hear those results, see what folks think. Because I know when I was the campus police officer, it didn't take too long for me to realize that we were just as much an educator as we were enforcement. And not
Absolutely.
just how we enforced, what we enforced as a means of education, but the conversations we had, the presentations, our culture, our reputation can all foster education, learning, and growth. And yeah. Enough about me.
No, it's totally relevant. I totally appreciate that.
Who are some of the community partners that you're working with? I saw the list on the website, and there's a ton, but tell me about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really open to anyone, right? Again, who sees himself. And UT is such a campus that it really is a heartbeat of Austin. Austin is wonderful and weird and everything. I think it's just exploded with growth and innovation. So we certainly have our campus partners that are crucial, and then we're really looking at community partners too, and engaging some hospitality owners, across the street that's kind of, adjacent to campus and beyond. And then it's really looking at others in the community. I think one really great example I can give is a partnership we have with Sands Bar, which is Austin's first sober bar. And it's also been popping up at a city near you, most likely. He's on a national tour right now, but Chris Marshall has become a good friend of mine, who is the owner and founder of Sands Bar. And he really wanted to create a space that fostered connection, that didn't revolve around alcohol, and not just for those in recovery, but really anyone who's looking for that connection and in an alcohol-free space. And so his mission just so naturally aligned with Shift's that when I first kind of started Shift, I was like, I got to meet this guy. And we became, I think, just fast friends. And I think we both, I can say I just feel so inspired by him and his passion and his work. And we've kind of knew we would always work together in some way. And, we would bring him in and have him kind of host some or be a part of some events we were doing, or, kind of started building. And the cool thing about that is we had him at an event at our launch, actually, and which happened to be in the president's office. And now the president's office has used him for other events several times. So we started seeing this traction and interest and, more demand even for Chris. And so we were like, hey, it should be students shaking up these zero proof cocktails. And so we are actually in the process of launching. We just hired our first team of shift makers, is what we're calling them. And it's a partnership with Sands Bar in Austin and Shift. And we are, we'll be training them in crafting and making delicious zero proof cocktails, but also in leadership and entrepreneurship and, helping them really see themselves as part of this culture shaping agent. So we're super excited for that. And so we see that as not only will these students be kind of, mixing up drinks at events that we host or we put on, but they'll also be available for students to have at their events or faculty or staff to hire at their events so that we start to have this experiential sense of this experience that's different, right? That it's not students mixing alcoholic drinks, or when we look at the bar, it's not, the same kind of variety that we're used to. Even if that's present, now we're offering another option, another alternative. And I can say I'm just super excited for these students to get in there and shake it up. Because their responses when we were interviewing them in terms of, hey, this is what Shift is, what are you interested in, why did you apply for this job, it was just everything you would hope to hear from, I drink, but I just really like the idea of having an option, that isn't, or I don't drink, and this would make me feel more included as part of this atmosphere, or part of this community. Because we hear that from students a lot, that either they're going to parties mostly because that's just where the socialization is happening, or I don't drink and I don't feel like I'm doing college right because of that. And those are the narratives I think we really want to change. And when we hear something different, we'll know cultures are shifting. So that's one example of a community partnership, but there's certainly, other folks I think that we're bringing in different ways as well.
Yeah. Any quick little bullets or short bits of advice for our listeners that want to go engage with community members?
Every community is different. Every culture is different. And I think it's really like first stepping back and observing. And I think, Dave, I've heard you speak in different realms about like the readiness of change, mm-hmm. right? Or kind of acknowledging like who those allies, who those partners are going to be. I think, in Shift, we've really tried to reach out and do some, steeper asks where like, hey, the bar next door that might not be as excited or invested, but then it's also finding those partners that really align with your mission, like Chris. That was just very serendipitous, but there's another restaurant owner in town that's really well known that does a run club, and he fosters community through running and run. So we've kind of tried to connect with him. And so there's these other folks that really our missions just so closely align. And then I think we're kind of, hoping that we can get some momentum that will then invite and help other folks see themselves in our work as well. So I think, there's no fail-safe. I think we're lucky in Austin that we have a lot of really passionate, innovative folks when it comes to alcohol-free spaces and recovery and just wellness in general. So it's kind of leaning into those, but it's also, I think, just really dependent on what your community looks like. And I think it's also, I'm smiling. I'm thinking of one of our founders of Shift. There's 4 actually admins that are kind of the brains behind Shift, and one of them, her voice comes to mind of like, just walk up and feign how does she put it, like feign or fake familiarity, right? Like just walk up and be like, hey, I know you, like, I'm from this, like, even if you've only met them for 5 minutes. So her voice comes into mind sometimes of just being bold and sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't, but I think it's really that persistence and trusting that your mission and your work, will drive you forward. And I think innovation, I think we have to think differently. I think there's a lot of coalitions, a lot of people that are showing up at a lot of different tables. I don't know. I can just speak from my experience, especially with the pandemic. I think this idea of burnout or just being capped or tapped or whatever is very real. So I think people get more excited when it feels different, of like, oh, well, this isn't going to be just another table I show up at, but maybe we can actually do something action oriented that serves us both in a different way that feels like we're reaching an audience we've always wanted to reach. So finding those mutual goals and those kind of innovative ideas and not being afraid to just kind of like pilot. I think we say pilot of the pilot a lot in Shift, or another phrase we use often is we're building the plane as we fly it, which is both scary, but I think it's in part, right? Like how we're learning and how we're experimenting.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Just be bold and fake familiarity. I can picture that. I can see that. I dig it. I dig it.
I don't know if that's tried and true and
Mm-hmm.
tested, but like it's worked in sometimes for sure.
Yeah. Just don't be shy. Go say hi.
Yeah, I like it.
Oh my
That's funny.
gosh, that rhymed.
Put that on a bumper sticker, Dave.
Yes, yes. Shift happens. Don't be shy. Go say hi.
There we go.
All right. You did kind of tease a little bit about your 6 pilot initiatives. What are they?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really important to note first that Shift is uniquely placed, unique in higher ed at least, in 2 camps. One being the School of Undergraduate Studies, so we are part of academic affairs very much so, and then we're also in the Division of Student Affairs in University Health Services and Counseling Mental Health Center. So I really Shift really has a leg in both camps, which is pretty unique for especially
Yes.
for an institution as large as UT. So because of that, our pilots really we hope to really span that holistic experience of a student, right? So our first 2 pilots are really in that academic realm. Our first pilot is training faculty. Our second pilot is training student academic mentors. So we have a lot of first year interest group mentors, as well as kind of peer academic coaches and the like. And so it's training those students as well as faculty, training them in different ways, but in essence, on ways that they can enhance protective factors in their interactions in the classroom. So faculty will meet with them, we'll go through their syllabus, we'll go through the 40 assets and have them identify and pick at least 10 assets that they feel like they can naturally lean into. So it's not about asking them to do anything different or new. It's about helping them articulate and put more intention behind some of the things they're already doing that are protective factors. And maybe that's adding or tweaking something, in a way that feels, I think, organic for them. Because that's a challenge when it comes to faculty. Like they are the experts. They have the way they like to teach. And it can look so different, which is the beauty of the 40 assets, is that there are, so many ways to approach that. So faculty, kind of really lean into those, as well as we kind of help students identify and understand protective factors, because that's a little bit of a shift of their understanding too. So how to put those in those interactions simultaneously, how do we invite, or how do we encourage, or how do we support conversations around substance use or misuse in culture? And so sometimes that's really easy. One of our professors teaches a young people in drugs class. Natural fit, super easy to work drugs in there and the culture of drugs. Another one teaches, calculus, and he's kind of like, how the heck, am I going to? So it's kind of having those conversations about well-being and doing what feels right for them. And sometimes it's surprising, like there's faculty who are teaching, about czars and leaders in Russia and the use of alcohol, in repressing rebellion historically, right? And so like that's a great segue that they wouldn't have necessarily kind of put together, but because we're having this conversation, it's kind of become a really interesting kind of piece of the course. So that's pilot 1. Pilot 2, similarly with the student mentors, and really I think that's been a growth area of understanding where their challenges are. Like, hey, we're not the experts. I don't feel comfortable having this conversation. Okay, well, what do we need to address, and how do we give you the tools that you need to feel like you don't have to be the expert, you just have to be the caring student that you are, and here's some resources to know about, and some other ways to approach it. So those have been really successful and interesting kind of academic pilots, or pilots on the academic side, I should say. And then our 3rd and 4th pilots are really in this environmental piece, right? So looking at community engagement, looking at how do we engage the hospitality community in harm reduction strategies, how do we kind of, reach out to these community partners. And then the 4th one, I feel like 3 and 4 kind of obviously for natural reasons kind of go interweave with each other, but it's looking at safer events. And I would say that's not only, how do we create opportunities outside of party culture for students to connect and having more of those opportunities, but also how do we make the parties that are happening safer. And I think it's an important distinction where it's not us Shift or us UT Austin, like putting harm reduction resources like here, here's what we want you to do, but helping really almost infiltrate like that party culture to help those students identify that as meaningful and get their buy-in. And so we're doing that through something we call the Shift List, which is a series of, and this is a partnership with a lot of folks around campus, to really help some of those educational opportunities, help them understand harm reduction, help them understand their culture, and empower them to kind of help shape their organizational culture to whatever student org or community they belong to. So we try to customize it in that way. So environmental kind of community strategies, and then safer events are kind of our third and fourth pilot. Our fifth pilot is really tech driven. So it's how do we leverage technology to kind of reduce, the negative consequences or behavior, destigmatize conversations. And so that has taken a really interesting kind of path where it kind of started as like, how do we maybe like get to students at the time they're making decisions about their, their use, or, what would that look like if it's coming from peers? Is it a text platform? Is it this? Is it this? And we've done a lot of research, and we've actually hired a consultant to help us. And really what we heard from students is we want expert knowledge, but we also want peer stories. There's a lot of movement in the idea of stories. So it's kind of taking the shape of a chatbot that we're in the process of developing, to where it really gives both of those things, that students can ask their questions and get not only kind of the expert advice from, UT faculty and staff around, but they can also get peer stories of like, hey, here's what it was like for me when I, needed to call help for a friend, or when I called our helpline, or whatever it is, or, here's what it's like to come down from Molly. Here's what, all of these questions, here's what it's like to use Narcan. And so I think really trying to build a cohesive platform that really allows students to ask their questions, to learn. One of the things I've observed for students is culturally, right? Like students feel often that they're supposed to know everything about drugs. And yet, the way that we've talked about drugs, or they've been taught about drugs, is you don't talk about them, which if you can't talk about them, how can you ask questions to know everything? So there's this huge gap. And in my experience, students really want to know. They want to have these conversations. They're very invested in it. So that's what our fifth pilot is hoping that we can use technology to kind of create opportunities to address that problem. And then our real quickly, because I know I will try to keep myself succinct. Sorry, Dave. The sixth pilot is more of an opportunity for folks, but we had set some of our grant money aside to really be a funding opportunity for anyone across campus that has an idea or has a passion for shifting culture around substance use, that they can apply for that, and Shift can kind of offer these Shiftivation awards. And so anyone from across campus, it has to be have student representation, as well as faculty and staff, in a way to kind of keep it broad and hopefully inclusive, to be able to kind of fund some of those ideas. And that's been a really cool thing to see. We get outside of the prevention bubble, where it's not just us saying, here's what we want to do, but we're really inviting those community members in to get their ideas brought to fruition.
Have you had any rounds of those Shiftivation awards or projects yet?
Yeah, we've had, they're all kind of in process. So we have, we have one that is Operation Naloxone, which was kind of already existed before Shift, but because of Shift, they're able to kind of expand some of their reach. And that's been, I think, just something hugely important on our campus, where students are really curious and interested and passionate about knowing more about opioids and opioid overdoses and Narcan and preventing those. So that's just been a really cool thing to see them grow. We had another Shiftivation award with ethnography, with our ethnography lab here, and that we're really engaging students to go out and actually observe and start to kind of look at our culture and articulate some of that. And that really launched in about spring of 2020. So I think they were starting to pick it back up maybe like this semester. And I think it's just going to be so fascinating to see what they find, especially since our culture shifted quite significantly. So those are a couple of examples. I think we have a couple students looking to kind of start, some campaigns of their own that are getting some funding. So I'm excited to see where some of them grow, but that's just a couple examples.
That is awesome. I'm excited to see what comes out of Shiftivation as well. That is just really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff though going on. Great 6 pilot initiatives rolling. Love the engagement with faculty, community members, and students. I mean, such an opportunity for the entire community to come together I love it. I love it. And you'd said a line actually before we press the record button about the job of prevention or the business that we're in when it comes to prevention. Do you remember what that line was? Putting you on the spot.
Well,
What was it?
yeah, I think I've probably said it. My team will roll their eyes. We're in the business of shifting culture. I don't know if that's what I said or not. Actually, what did I say?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I think we were talking about the pandemic, right? And just
Mm-hmm.
what a big culture shift that was, right? Like Shift launched in 2019, and within 6 months, our culture had significantly changed. But we are in the business of culture change. So, and it's just that we have to be adaptable and flexible. And I think that's just going to be true I think that's always true, has always been true. But I think especially now, right? Like, I don't think we're moving back to anything that was, right? And it's how do we reshape and redefine what goes forward? And there's a lot of opportunity for that as preventionists, especially in health and well-being. It is at the forefront of everyone's mind, unfortunately, because a lot of us are just feeling tapped out, or kind of feeling some of the mental health distress because of what we've been living through with COVID and the limitations, as well as everything else going on in the world. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us as prevention leaders to really be innovative, to think differently, to look at this business of culture change in a way that really engages those we maybe haven't thought of engaging before, as part of the solution. I think there's just a lot of really fun opportunity and creativity that's possible as we all try to shape and reshape whatever a healthy culture means going forward.
Our culture is ever shifting, changing every single moment, but y'all are being intentional about that shift, that culture change there at UT Austin. Wonderful stuff. Got two more questions for you
Great.
before we end this episode. One being, if you were going to give one last call to action, one last piece of advice, or if you're going to remember one thing from this episode, remember this. What would that be?
Ooh, talk about putting me on the spot, Dave. Man. I think the thing that comes to mind is a question we ask ourselves multiple times a day, I would say, in Shift is, how do we leverage what exists and where can we innovate? And I think partnership is crucial, and it can be hard and it can be challenging because we're asking people to do things differently, or we're trying to, engage folks that maybe haven't been engaged before, or whatever it might be. But we all share a commonality, a common goal most times, right? Like, I think we're all really invested in student well-being and student success, and we just come from it at different ways. And again, UT is a large institution. A lot of folks are doing a lot of amazing things. And so much of our work is not wanting to recreate the wheel, but how do we really leverage, and what does that mean? And a lot of that is intentional partnership. And then where can we innovate, and where can we invite those folks to innovate, as well? And so I think it's really a balance of, learning about what exists, leveraging what exists, and then being bold and innovating and thinking, a little bit differently in order to really shape healthy culture change.
Absolutely wonderful. My last question, how can folks get involved with Shift?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, it's definitely check out our website, shift.utexas.edu. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at UT Shift. And that's a great way just to maybe engage with us, or kind of, check us out and get in touch with us. And then we welcome partnership. I think shoot us an email, or whatever it might be. Shoot us a phone call, or we live by the Zoom these days. But I think we really welcome those conversations. I've been really fortunate to have conversations with folks, at the University of Notre Dame, at UNC. Like, there's just, we're all doing similar work, and I really welcome those conversations to learn about what we're doing, and then also where we can leverage and innovate together, right? Like, there's no reason we can't do a cross, especially in this digital age, right? Like, we can't have some culture shifting opportunities around. So just reach out to us. We have, on our website, we certainly have, an open letter to our community that's geared toward our Austin community, but certainly I think it's applicable to a broader audience. And we have a really great student advisory board that is super active, and we have faculty that are super active that are a part of us. And so I think we would welcome, folks that even if you don't see yourself as a Longhorn, but see yourself as a leader in prevention and substance misuse prevention, we want to connect with you.
Just goes right in line. Did you do that on purpose to set me up for my tagline?
I teach.
Yes, queued me up perfectly. Because yes, absolutely.
I love it.
I mean, y'all there at Shift believe what I believe, in that prevention is better together, and together we are stronger. It's been an absolute delight to catch up with you and hear about the amazing things that are happening on campus and in your community. Can't wait for the next episode. Something to do with the shift makers, I'm thinking, needs to be in the works.
I can't wait to have you meet them. They're going to be awesome.
Yes. Wonderful. All right. Well, keep up the great work.
Thanks so much, David.
Thank you again. That concludes this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and share this episode with a friend before you leave. And we look forward to seeing you on social media, because prevention is better together. Together, we are stronger.